As we have shown, the IMF and World Bank started attaching strings to financing packages to developing countries in the wake of the Latin American debt crisis in the 1980s. These programs were known as Structural Adjustment Programs, or SAPs for short, and weren't just about fixing immediate financial issues anymore. They started to influence nearly every aspect of a country's economic policy. Initially, the IMF and World Bank were meant to help countries stabilize their economies by focusing on specific financial matters like currency exchange rates and balance of payments. But over time, they expanded their reach. They began dictating policies on government budgets, industrial regulations, agricultural pricing, labor laws, and even the privatization of state-owned enterprises. In the 1990s, this reach extended even further into what we might consider the political arena. They started imposing governance conditionalities, which means they required changes in how countries were governed as a condition for financial aid. This included pushing for democracy, decentralizing government power, making central banks independent from government control, and changing how companies were managed. Now, you might wonder why this is a problem. Ha-Joon Chang gives a fascinating example in his book along the following lines. Imagine you went to a bank to get a loan for your small business, and the bank manager started telling you how to run your family life, what to eat for dinner, how much time to spend at home, or who you should be friends with. That would feel intrusive and overstepping, right? Similarly, these international institutions began meddling in areas that went far beyond their original purpose. The reasoning they gave was that everything affects economic performance, so they had the right to intervene in all areas. But this logic is a slippery slope. If taken to the extreme, it means there's no aspect of a country's affairs that they couldn't control, from cultural practices to personal freedoms. Adding to the issue, wealthier nations, sometimes called bad Samaritan countries by critics like Ha-Joon Chang, use their influence over the IMF and World Bank to push policies that benefited themselves. For example, during financial rescue packages, they would demand that the borrowing country open up its markets to foreign competition or allow foreign companies to buy local businesses. While this might help the lending countries expand their markets, it could harm the local industries in the borrowing country. So why did these policies persist even when they weren't always beneficial? One big reason is the governance structure of these international institutions. In the IMF and the World Bank, voting power is based on how much money a country contributes, not on a one country, one vote basis. This means that rich countries have a lot more influence over decisions. Collectively, they control over 60% of the votes. The United States, for instance, has enough voting power to veto major decisions. This imbalance meant that the policies favored the interests of the wealthy nations. Developing countries often had little choice but to accept the conditions if they wanted to receive much-needed financial aid. Moreover, these institutions often promoted a one-size-fits-all set of policies, not taking into account the unique circumstances of each country. Even efforts to make the process seem more inclusive, like involving local officials in designing the programs, didn't always help. Many developing countries lacked the resources and expertise to effectively negotiate with these powerful institutions. Sometimes, former employees of the IMF or World Bank would end up in key government positions within these countries, which meant the same ideas kept circulating. The World Trade Organization faced similar criticisms. Although it operates on a one-country, one-vote system in theory, in practice, the wealthier nations often have the upper hand. Important negotiations sometimes happen behind closed doors, with only select countries invited, leaving many other developing nations out of the loop. Additionally, poorer countries often lack the staff and expertise to participate fully in all the discussions, putting them at a disadvantage. So despite the negative impacts like slower economic growth, increased inequality, and social unrest, the reforms persisted because the countries imposing them had the power to do so. The developing nations needed financial assistance and were not in a strong position to refuse the conditions attached. Hey, if you like that video, click somewhere to the right of your screen to watch the full unfiltered version. All the best and thank you.